Welcome to tonight's video, where we delve into the shadows of history, fiction, and the unknown. Today, we turn our gaze to one of the most iconic characters from classic literature, the Artful Dodger from Charles Dickens Oliver Twist. But what if I told you that the story we've been told is just a sanitized version of a much darker reality? A reality where the innocent facade of a boy thief hides sinister forces, brutal exploitation, and a conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of Victorian society. This is the dark truth behind the Artful Dodger. To understand the true darkness behind the Artful Dodger, we must first strip away the romanticized image of a clever, streetwise boy who outwits adults with a wink and a smile. Instead, picture a child born into poverty, with no family, no safety, and no future. A child who, like so many in Victorian London, was abandoned by society and forced into a life of crime just to survive. But what if Dodger's journey into the underworld wasn't merely a matter of survival? What if it was orchestrated by those who sought to profit from the desperation of children? We know from historical records that Victorian London was rife with exploitation. Child labor, human trafficking, and criminal syndicates were all too common. In this dark underbelly, children were seen as commodities, and Dodger was no exception. The character of the Artful Dodger is often seen as an independent operator, a boy who chose a life of crime. But the truth may be far more disturbing. In reality, Dodger could have been a victim of systematic exploitation, groomed from a young age to be part of a criminal enterprise. His skills in pickpocketing, his charm, his ability to evade the law, these were not just natural talents. They were the results of rigorous training, indoctrination, and psychological manipulation. Imagine a network of criminals who preyed on vulnerable children, taking them off the streets, promising them protection, but instead turning them into tools for their own gain. Dodger, like many others, would have been caught in this web, with no escape, no choice, and no hope. To truly understand the dark truth behind the Artful Dodger, we must examine the man who played a central role in his life. Fagin. In Dickens' novel, Fagin is portrayed as a manipulative, greedy old man who leads a group of young thieves. But what if Fagin was more than just a petty criminal? What if he was part of a larger, more sinister organization? Let's consider the possibility that Fagin wasn't acting alone. Imagine if he were merely a middleman, a recruiter for a more powerful syndicate that operated in the shadows of Victorian society. This syndicate could have been involved in a range of illicit activities: child labor, human trafficking, even murder for hire. Fagin's role would have been to find, groom, and control children like the Artful Dodger, ensuring they remained loyal and productive members of this criminal network. But why would Fagin be so invested in Dodger? Perhaps because Dodger wasn't just any street urchin. Perhaps he was special. Maybe Dodger had a particular set of skills, or a certain charm that made him invaluable to Fagin's operation. Or perhaps Dodger knew something. Something dangerous. Something that could bring down Fagin's entire operation if it ever got out. What if the true reason behind Dodger's arrest wasn't just bad luck? What if it was orchestrated to keep him from revealing the dark secrets he knew? This leads us to another chilling possibility, that Dodger's entire life was manipulated by unseen forces, and that his fate was sealed from the very beginning. To understand the full extent of the dark truth behind the Artful Dodger, we need to take a closer look at the society in which he lived. Victorian London was a place of stark contrasts. Wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness, light and darkness. And it was in this world that the line between the respectable and the criminal was often blurred. Imagine a society where the upper class turned a blind eye to the suffering of the poor, or worse, profited from it. What if the criminal syndicates that exploited children like the Artful Dodger weren't just tolerated by the authorities, but were actually protected by them? Perhaps certain members of the police force, the judiciary, or even the government were involved in these illicit activities, ensuring that the most vulnerable members of society remained trapped in a cycle of poverty and crime. Dodger's arrest, then, becomes more than just the consequence of a life of petty theft. It could have been a calculated move to silence him, to ensure that the truth about the corruption at the heart of Victorian society never came to light. After all, Dodger wasn't just a thief. He was a witness to the dark dealings that kept the rich in power and the poor in chains. And what about Oliver Twist? What if Oliver wasn't the innocent, pure-hearted boy we've always believed him to be? What if he too was caught up in this web of corruption? Perhaps Oliver was the key to a larger conspiracy, and Dodger was trying to protect him. Or perhaps he was trying to expose the truth. Now let's take a closer look at some of the key events in Oliver Twist through the lens of this darker narrative. First, consider Dodger's arrest. In the original story, it's portrayed as a moment of misfortune, a slip-up in an otherwise successful career as a pickpocket. But what if Dodger's arrest was no accident? What if it was orchestrated by Fagin, or by those even higher up in the criminal hierarchy to ensure Dodger could never speak out? Imagine Dodger standing before the judge, knowing that if he reveals what he knows, his life could be in danger. Perhaps the judge himself is in on the conspiracy, ensuring that Dodger is sentenced quickly and quietly, with no chance to defend himself. Dodger's silence in the face of his arrest could be seen as a sign of fear. Fear of what might happen if he were to speak the truth. Then there's the question of Fagin's trial. In the novel, Fagin is eventually caught and sentenced to death. But what if Fagin was merely a scapegoat, sacrificed to protect the true masterminds behind the criminal network? Dodger's story then becomes one of tragedy. A boy who was used and discarded by a corrupt system that cared nothing for his life, his dreams, or his humanity. As we peel back the layers of the Artful Dodger's story, we find ourselves asking, who really controlled his fate? Was it Fagin, the shadowy syndicate, or perhaps even the very society that claimed to despise him? The dark truth is that Dodger's life was shaped by forces far beyond his control. Forces that remain hidden in the shadows of history, their secrets still waiting to be uncovered. In the end, the Artful Dodger is more than just a character in a book. He represents the countless children who were exploited, manipulated, and silenced by a society that saw them as nothing more than expendable. And while we may never know the full truth of his story, we can be certain of one thing: the darkness that surrounded him is very real, and it's a darkness that still exists in many forms today. So next time you read Oliver Twist, remember the Artful Dodger. Not as a charming rogue, but as a tragic figure caught in a web of deceit, corruption, and unimaginable cruelty. This is the dark truth behind the Artful Dodger. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows. If you enjoyed this exploration of the dark truth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest dives into the hidden stories behind the stories you think you know. Until next time, stay curious and remember, nothing is ever as it seems. Good night.